After 70 long years, woman discovers the identity of the mysterious visitor at her brother's grave. But before we start, please give the video a like and make sure to subscribe to Wonderbot and hit the bell so you'll never miss any uploads from us. The mystery remained unsolved for 70 years. A stranger used to leave flowers and other stuff on her brother's grave. It was not anyone from the family or friends. She tried to find out who used to put things on there, but the stranger would always manage to dodge her. This head-spinning mystery continued for 7 decades. And when eventually the stranger came into the light, the sister had her whole life turned around. Ann Keir couldn't get the chance to spend enough time with her brother Carl, as he died when she was only 7 years old. The little boy took his last breath while struggling for his life with the overwhelming water. But the helpless boy could not fight for long and ultimately gave up his life. Ann Keir was too small to understand the impact of the unfortunate accident on her family, but as she grew up, she realized how much she missed not having her brother around. One more thing that kept her reminding her brother was a mysterious visitor who it seemed had taken the vow to not let the grave of Carl ever be bereft of stuff. Every Sunday, Ann Keir goes to meet her late brother with a bunch of flowers. In early times, she used to get there with her mother, and now she had shouldered all of the responsibility on her own after her parents gave up their soul. It was during one of those Sundays she saw an amazing sight. Her brother's grave was covered with flowers, and it was clearly not her who had done this. Strangely, for years, it was only her who used to put flowers at Carl's grave, but now all of a sudden, there was someone else too who was leaving things there. Who could it be? Keir remembers. There are 3 hydrangea heads there, and there's also a red rose, which I swear wasn't there on Sunday. She concluded, so somebody has been here since I put my flowers there on Sunday. Initially, she thought some would be mistaken her brother's grave for some other one, but that assumption of hers got axed when she saw the flowers and stuff again at the same place. Who used to come here in Keir's absence? Along with flowers, the visitor would also put much other weird stuff that made Keir raise her eyebrow even more. The grave did not have only flowers, but many other gifts, and those gifts were anything but normal. Anne explained, it's not even just flowers. One year there was a massive sheaf of corn, a pheasant's feather. Well, these gifts only added to the puzzle. Who leaves a sheaf of corn or a pheasant's feather at the grave? Did these weird-looking gifts mean something? The mystery was only getting thick with no clue, but as they say, there's always a way. One Sunday, Keir found a letter with the gifts by the mysterious visitor that definitely cleared a few things. The letter was addressed to Carl. Yes, the same Carl who had died many years earlier. Oddly, Keir did not find the letter once, but several times. The letter had messages written on it. Was someone pulling a prank on her? If yes, then nothing can be brutal as this. If no, then who was doing all these things and for what purpose? Well, the letters did not have any name on it, but it indeed made Keir and the unidentified visitor popular, and it was going to help. Camilla Ruse, who's associated with BBC, came across the story and got immediately intrigued by it. She wanted to know more and more about Carl and the mysterious visitor. So she decided to follow the case. She said, first time I heard the story, it stuck in my mind. What was it about this boy that had led someone to do all of this? Camilla said. So one day I just gave his sister a ring. The beginning of an unbelievable adventure had been made. So an intriguing journalist and a surprise letter had teamed up to solve the mystery. Both the women had different backgrounds. Whereas Anne was leading a very normal life in her small village, Camilla was a hardcore journalist serving the BBC. Camilla was well versed in subjects like science and zoology. Pursuing a story filled with mystery was new to her. She waited impatiently to meet Anne. What irked Keir and Camilla the most was the fact that the gifts and flowers were not there occasionally. Keir would find them almost every week. The practice was going on for 7 decades, and Keir was yet to find out anything about the identity of the visitor. How much she tried, she could never forgive. Who could it possibly be who still cares enough about Carl to put something on his grave? Who was there who could not forget Carl just like Anna? The mystery was soon going to get resolved. To solve the mystery, it was important for Camilla to learn as much about Carl as she could. And who could be better to take this information from than Anna, Carl's sister? The journalist asked her to tell her as much as she could about her brother. Though Anna could not tell much about her late brother, as she was much too young to store all the information at that time, she still remembered the day she learned her brother had gone forever. She said, "I was only 7 when he died. I haven't got that many memories of him, unfortunately." But she clearly remembers the state her family had plunged into. Anne, with tears rolling down her cheeks, tried to console her mother. She said, "Never mind, Mummy, we'll see him again one day." The grief that came along with the sad news of Carl's demise blanketed the entire village. Each and every individual who came across this news got shaken to their core. The boy was very friendly by nature, who had won village people's hearts. Moreover, he was too small and helpless to face such a tragic end. The impact could be seen on the people of the village who still talk about that incident. Even though many years have passed by, that horrifying memory still persists in some people's minds. So, was the mysterious visitor any of the village people? She was soon going to find out. And now the story of the mysterious visitor had taken over the whole of the village. The locals, too, came up with their own assumptions and stories. One of them stated, "Of course, it could have been somebody who was in the choir, in the scouts, and in the school with him. But who would remember Carl for such a long time, and for why? There must be a solid reason." Anne was aware of these assumptions, but what exactly did she do to get it resolved? Anne did everything in her power to solve the mystery. She talked about the mysterious visitor in various interviews on the radio, wrote articles about the person in local newspapers, and even went on to attend scout reunions in hopes of finding the mysterious man there. She reminisces, "Left a typewritten message asking if the person who was doing it, I'd sort of like to speak to them. I put a message in the parish magazine to see if anybody comes forward. Still, nobody comes forward." It all started 70 years ago when Carl lost his life. The first day of 1947 turned out to be the last day for 12-year-old Carl. He'd gone on a camping trip with his scouts in Wales. The boys went to the beach to play after escaping the attention of the leader. Unfortunately, Carl was one of those boys. The boys were so busy playing that they could not notice what was going on around them. It was when they decided to go back they realized Carl wasn't there. They all started looking for him, and one of them eventually found him face down. If there was anyone from the scouts, then the person should be in his 80s. Fast forward 70 years and there was no lead, no headway for Camilla and Anne. Camilla suggested Anne visit Gloucestershire archives. Perhaps they would find something of worth there. Surprisingly, the archive had stored many pictures of Carl and his scouts that Anne had never laid eyes on before. One of the pictures among them attracted their attention the most. One of the pictures featured Carl that seemed to be taken right before the accident. They jotted down every big or tiny detail they could. The pair also found an address that was of a man named Eric White. It was he who had taken the picture. They decided to get to the man, only to get the mystery tangled even more. They met Eric White, who indeed had captured the photos. He also confirmed that he was not around when Carl drowned. During the chat with Eric, the investigators stumbled upon another name, George Lee. This man claimed that he actually had seen a boy try saving Carl. Now the investigators had one more lead before them. One point to note was that none of the people ever visited Carl's grave. In fact, no one knew about the location of his grave. However, Anne and Camilla decided to meet George. Before going further on looking outside for evidence, Camilla decided to go through the gifts and letters that Anne had found at the grave. Many of the pieces included poetry. They had to decipher the poetry in order to know more about the secret visitor. Now all they needed was someone who could correctly decipher the poetry, and so they thought of contacting Stephen Regan, a Durham University professor of English. Regan spoke, "The lost ship is mourning the loss of sailors, a whole group of sailors." No need to say whoever had written the poem must have known Carl. He also said, "It has to do with the transience of youth, the loss of potential." The news did give Anne some hope, along with a big surprise. She had no idea that Robert Stephen Hawker was a schoolmate of her late brother. Well, that wasn't it. She had some amazing news to share with Camilla. "I've got some details of schoolboys," she told her. However, Anne had never seen these people, let alone been in touch. She didn't know whether she'd be able to meet them or not at the time. Camilla assured her that they will. Initially, Gloucestershire phone books seemed good for nothing for them. Most of the numbers in the books led to dead ends. What's more than half of them were dead. And who they got to talk did not remember anything about Carl. Though their efforts did not bear a desirable result, the whole of Pressbury learned about them. Those who had witnessed that unfortunate event came forward to talk to Anne and help her in her quest. Shortly after that, the duo successfully gathered a group of people around the cemetery nearing Carl's grave. The locals were once again in tears when they talked about that incident. Pamela Parkin, one of the locals, said, "I've been in Pressbury all my life," she added, "and it was a great tragedy when this happened, and all the village was really upset about it." One of the locals revealed that some of them even hid behind the cemetery to catch the mysterious visitor. Professor Regan put forth what caught his interest the most. He explained, "I was reading about the life of Robert Stephen Hawker, this Victorian poet who'd written this famous poem about a shipwreck. Studied at Cambridge, but before he went there, he'd been to school. I discovered Cheltenham Grammar School," he cleared. By this, he knew that the message had a big link with the school life of Carl. The professor opened up with Camilla on this. Call it a miracle, just after 2 days of coming up with the name Dennis Parker, in the case, Dennis Parker called Anne. She couldn't hold her surprise when the person from the other side said, "This is Dennis Parker." But before Anne could think of anything else, Dennis said, "Before you get too excited, it isn't me leaving the things on Carl's grave." So it was all back to square one. So they came back to where they'd started from. Once again, they took help of scout records to find anything relevant to their search. One thing they noticed was that there was a boy in the camp who kept coming up in most of the pictures of Carl. Well, they finally had found something of worth from the book. Both the women stumbled upon more information about the boy. They learned that the boy had shared the tent with Carl the night before he drowned. They felt a hunch that this boy could lead them to the mysterious visitor, but unfortunately there was no record of the boy. No matter how much they searched, they could not find anything about him. No information has been recorded of the boy since 2014. But it seemed that even the fates wanted them to know about the mysterious visitor. During research on the boy, Camilla learned that he had changed his surname after getting remarried recently. The man went by the name of Ronald Joseph Westborough. Furthermore, she also found out that the man was the best friend of Carl. They'd been friends for a very long time. She immediately informed Anne, "Last week I spoke to somebody who I think might be possibly the person." Well, that was an emotional moment for Anne. She had tears in her eyes when Camilla broke news to her. Camilla explained, "He was there on the day that Carl died. He also spoke at the inquest." She did not forget to mention it was really important to find him because he would know where Carl was buried if he'd been at the funeral. Ronald on the phone told Camilla that he is the one who'd been regularly visiting Carl's grave, and he also expressed his wish to meet Anne. Anne said with tears streaming down her cheek, "That means he must have been visiting when Mom and Dad were still alive." Her sister took it on from there as Anne had gone. Chocked with tears, she said, "Even if they haven't found anything and we can't get closure, at least we've done something and Mom and Dad will be proud of us."